Hi, this is a voiceover of my project. Um, so my president was James Polk. He was the 11th president. He was technically the youngest president at that time. He was only 49. He only served one term. His term was from 1849 to 1853. It was a very long time ago. Um, he was actually the dark horse of his election. No one really expected him to win the presidency, but the independent party actually took votes from the other party, so he ended up winning and becoming an amazing president. It was not a bad decision for that to happen. So he was actually a great chief diplomat. He gained a large part of the United States through being an amazing chief diplomat. During the 1844 campaign, Polk had pledged to settle the boundary of the Oregon Territory with Britain, and once in office, he moved quickly to acquire sole title to Oregon. His supporters in the 1844 campaign had promoted the occupations of the entire territory, as encapsulated in their slogan, 54 fight, which is basically just threatening to fight the British if they don't give over the Oregon Territory with it going to 54-40. Both Great Britain and the U.S. had jointly occupied this region since 1818, and it was clear to Polk that Polk wanted the west coast of North America for the United States, possibly even including Mexican-controlled California, which is another story. But in the beginnings of negotiations, Polk bluffed to the British that he wanted all the territory up to 54-40. In the end, the president's shrewd but unseemly bluster earned him a compromise rather than a war with the British. So, even though he threatened to fight the British, they ended up just compromising by giving Polk the 49th parallel, which would give the U.S. present day Oregon, Idaho, and Washington, as well as the control of the Columbia River. So he gave us a large portion of the United States just by being a chief diplomat with Great Britain and negotiation and all that good stuff. Another thing is whenever he really wanted to buy California from Mexico, so he decided to be a chief diplomat and send John Stiddow to Mexico with a plan to offer to buy California from Mexico. But Stiddow's arrival in Mexico triggered a revolt against the Mexican president, who indicated a willingness to deal with Stiddow. So he actually had a revolt by army officers who pledged to recover the stolen province of Mexico. So that's a whole other story. But another cool fact was that during the Mexican-American War, Polk used American Catholic priests who spoke Spanish to reassure Mexican civilians that the U.S. would not deprive them of the religion or of their church property. So not only was he an awesome chief diplomat, but he was really just a good person. So second, he was actually a great chief legislator. Polk really pushed to get legislation passed through Congress through various methods. He influenced these members of Congress by meeting with them in person, often hosting such meetings in the White House. Unusually for his time, he sought to mobilize public support for his proposals. With the strong backing from the public, Congress is more willing to approve of his proposals. Polk's annual message to Congress were his preferred means of, initiating legislation. In submitting these lengthy and densely argued documents each December, Polk fulfilled his constitutional charge to relay Congress information on the State of the Union. He devoted weeks and weeks to write these messages and used them to mobilize the public and Congress members. Whenever he vetoed a bill, he would send back an entire message, he would write out a message explaining his reasoning of why he vetoed that bill. That takes dedication. He had 4 goals to get done during his presidency, which he did thoroughly. It was to acquire the Oregon Territory from Britain and get that all smoothed over, acquire California, establish lower tariffs, and establish an independent treasury. He really set forth his domestic and economic agenda of lowering tariffs and establishing the independent treasury with the assistance of his Secretary of Treasury, Robert J. Walker. And the president and various congressional leaders fashioned a new tariff bill in 1846. When consideration in it hit rough spots in the road, Polk intervened directly and pressured members of Congress to approve of it. And in July, they finally endorsed the bill that the president sought. The other component of Polk's program, the independent treasury, was designed to terminate the deposit of federal revenues in certain selected banks, and instead to place all such money in special government vaults. After slowly considering the president's proposals in the busy spring of 1846, Congress finally consented to its passage in June. Thus, by midsummer, Polk had secured both pieces of his economic program. He did this in such a fast pace, and basically, he was one of the hardest workers. No, he was considered the hardest working president ever. He even quoted, "No president who performs his duties faithfully and conscientiously can have any leisure." He only took one vacation out of all the 4 years. He wanted to get all his stuff done in one term. And you know what? He did. But it really had an effect on him. He was an active negative, even though we just went over that, a couple days ago or yesterday. So he had an active negative personality. He really put forth his efforts to get this stuff done. He actually died 3 months after his presidency. Like, it tortured him. He became very thin. Some people think he died of cholera, but most people think he just worked himself to death. So last but not least is Commander-in-Chief. Whenever Polk offered to buy California for $20 million, but the Mexican government refused, the U.S. General Zachary Taylor led an army across the disputed lands to the Banks of Rio Grande in 1846. But the Mexican troops actually attacked his units and killed 16 of his men. So Polk, he just got up there and he seized upon this incident as proof of the Mexican treachery and quickly secured a declaration of war from Congress. He stepped up to this commander-in-chief position like nobody's business. No other president had to deal with the commander-in-chief role as much, so he basically defined what they do. His exercise of military power became a model for future presidents. He assumed full responsibility for the conduct of war, taking initiative in securing war legislation and finance, deciding on military strategy, appointing generals, and drafting their instructions, and directing the supply of efforts, and coordinating the work of the various bureaus and cabinet members. He insisted on being informed on every decision that was made by his cabinet members. The Mexican-American War was won on the battlefield as Polk provided as an exceptionally adept commander-in-chief. In addition, we received the New Mexico and California territories. Mexico, in what was called the Mexican Section, ceded over 1/3 of its territory to the U.S., increasing the latter size by 1/4. The Mexican Section now contains the present-day Arizona, Utah, Nevada, California, much of New Mexico, and portions of the Wyoming and of Colorado. So he gained a large part of the U.S. with being an awesome commander-in-chief too. So in the end, this dark horse candidate was considered the best president ever.